Chapter 3. The phone rang, and Atlas Dixon lurched awake with a scowl smeared across his sleepy face before he was even fully conscious. The one thing he hated more than almost anything else was being woken up in the middle of the night. It had been that way since he was little, and he'd grown up with the bad habit of being cranky whenever he didn't get enough sleep. But it didn't matter that he knew that about himself. It had stopped him from becoming a police officer and pulling all-night shifts when he needed to. It was thanks to people like him and the other dedicated officers of the Heford City Police Department that their neighborhood was as safe as it was. After serving on the force for more than 20 years, it was only instinctive to reach over to the bedside table and pick up the phone. He tried to clear his throat, but his voice still came out as a groggy slur. "Hello? Are you the one who sent this lackey after me?" The voice was cold and sinister. Atlas was awake in a second. He tried to keep his voice down so as not to wake his wife in the bed beside him. "Are you? Answer the question." "Did he tell you his name?" The voice replied more insistently this time. "Answer the question." "You answer mine first," Atlas whispered sternly. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Atlas could barely hear the other man breathing. Then, after a minute or so, "Driver's license says his name is Jason Finnick." "That's my guy," Atlas said. "You didn't hurt him, did you?" "He's fine, but he's lucky to be alive after you sent him after me in the middle of the night." "I didn't," Atlas replied. "He wasn't supposed to come to you until tomorrow. I had no idea he was out there right now." "Maybe I should teach him to follow instructions next time," the voice said in a threatening manner. "No, don't do anything to him," Atlas said, his heart quickening at the thought of Jason being harmed for such a little mistake. He sat up in bed, quietly, looking around the room in the dark for his shoes. "I'm on my way. Will you stay there till I get there? Would that be okay?" "Make it fast," the man on the other end of the phone said, his tone filled with exasperation. He hung up before Atlas did, which didn't surprise Atlas in the least. Before the big man could swing himself out of bed and locate his boots on the floor in the room, he felt a hand on his arm and knew he had not been quiet enough. "Who was that?" asked Mary Ann, her graying shoulder-length hair all tasseled about and blocking her half-open eyes. Atlas wondered if she was even actually awake, but he put his hand on hers nonetheless and spoke gently, or at least as gently as a man his size could when he was in a hurry. "It was him," Atlas said, standing and grabbing his jeans off the nearby chair. Mary Ann sat up in bed, rubbing her face with her hands to clear the sleep and hair from her eyes. "Why is he calling you now?" she asked, annoyed that she'd been woken up by someone inconsiderate enough to call at this late hour. "I'll explain when I get back," Atlas promised. "You can go back to sleep." Without even looking at him, Mary Ann laid back down in the bed, but not before rolling over and reaching across to the nightstand on the other side. She pulled a drawer open and fumbled around in the dark for a second, and Atlas immediately knew what she was looking for. By the time she had found what she wanted, Atlas had already put on his pants, his shirt, his bulletproof vest, and a windbreaker jacket over top of that. He pulled his thick boots onto his feet and snapped them closed, then stood up and looked over at his wife, who was once again sitting up on the bed. "Here, just in case," she said, fully awake and looking into the eyes of her husband with somber disquiet. Atlas reached out and took the semi-automatic pistol and the 10-round clip from his wife's outstretched hand. Sitting in the drawer for so long, the metal was cool to the touch, but like all the other firearms he used in his daily routine, this one fit perfectly into the palm of his hand. She held on to it for a second, not letting go, and she spoke in a low whisper to her husband. "Be careful," she instructed. Atlas nodded and she released the gun to him, lying back down as he slipped the clip into the handle with a soft click. He made sure a round was in the chamber, clicked the safety on, then tucked it into his holster underneath his left arm. He also checked his wallet to make sure his badge wasn't still there. Good. He'd left it in his drawer. "Do you want me to wake you back up when I get back?" he asked before he went out the door. "Unless you're bleeding and need to go to the hospital?" "No," she said, her voice muffled by the pillow. He smiled and shut the door quietly as he left. The location had been arranged at least a month in advance, and Atlas knew very well how to find it. He'd driven by many times while on patrol, so he knew what to look for and where to stop his car when he found the place in question. Granted, he had never driven by this late at night, but he'd lived in this neighborhood for over 30 years. It was eerie to him at first, walking into a place he'd known had existed for decades, but never actually set foot in until now. The alley was sandwiched in between two strips of shops on the side of the road. It was narrowed enough so that it was darker than the rest of its surroundings, but it was wide enough so that Atlas felt he should be safe at least getting to the end of it. Leaving his car 2 blocks away, he walked toward the alley with his hands in his pockets, stepping from the known to the unknown and feeling that nagging pressure at the back of his head that told him he probably shouldn't be here. He knew if he was attacked here that his sizable girth would prohibit him from moving very quickly in such a narrow space, but it didn't take him long to reach the very back of the alley where an unmarked wooden door was just barely cracked open, signaling that whoever was inside was still there. That was the agreed-upon sign that Jason was supposed to use in this instance, so Atlas knew that the building was occupied. Slowly, carefully, Atlas unzipped his jacket, making sure that his firearm was within reach, and silently opened the door the rest of the way, stepping inside and closing it behind him. He found himself enshrouded in total darkness and tried to decide what to do next. What would be the least threatening action he could take? Something that would let their guest know that he was not dangerous. He decided to follow his gut and go with the first option that came to him. "Hello?" he called plaintively. "Can you hear me?" The reply came a few seconds later, right before Atlas had been about to call again. "I hear you." From the sound of his voice, Atlas guessed that he was about 20 feet to his front right. There was enough of an echo so that Atlas also guessed that the entire place was one large room with a concrete floor. He had no idea what else might be in here, though, so that limited his options. He also wasn't entirely sure who he was dealing with. All he knew was that this person supposedly was important to their efforts, and Jason had recommended a meeting with him. Apparently that fact also bothered the man 20 feet to Atlas's left. "Who are you?" the voice demanded. "My name is Atlas Dixon," Atlas replied. Before he could say anything else, the voice fired another question at him. "What do you want with me?" "Listen, I understand that you're suspicious, but I promise you, I'm not here to hurt you." The man snorted. "Heard that before." "Is Jason here?" Atlas wanted to know. "He's here." "Let me see him, or talk to him." "You're talking right now." "Okay, then let him say something to me," Atlas suggested. "He's gagged." "Take the gag out." "Nice try." "I'm only concerned for Jason's safety," Atlas said sternly. "Now I understand that you're suspicious, and if I were you I would be too. But I came when you called, I answered your questions, so if you don't mind—" "You didn't answer my second question," the voice interrupted. "I asked you what you want with me. Why did you arrange this meeting with me in the first place?" "If I answer your question, will you turn the lights on?" "I'll think about it. And if the next sentence out of your mouth is not an explanation of why we're here right now, Jason's going to lose 2 of the fingers on his right hand." Atlas took in a deep breath. Maybe this was not the kind of person he was looking for, but then again he didn't blame him for being suspicious, and he had no idea what his experiences had been to get him to this point. Maybe he'd been treated badly for being who he was. Atlas knew nothing about him other than what Jason had told him, which hadn't been much. "I asked to see you because I have been led to understand that you have a gift," he said to the dark. "It's a special kind of gift. Some people would say that it isn't natural, that it's a power or a mutation, but what exactly it is or how you got it is not what concerns me. What I want you to know is that you are not the only one, that others like you are here in the world, and we want to help you." Atlas heard footsteps, boots making their way across the concrete floor from right to left, and something, it sounded like it could have been a chair, being dragged along with them. A metal panel swung open on the other side of the room, and then a switch was flipped, and Atlas was nearly blinded by the light that spilled from the 3 bulbs in the center of the ceiling. It took a second for his eyes to adjust to the new light level, and when they did, he saw very clearly that they were in a large open room with a concrete floor and concrete walls that had no windows. The ceiling was low, thick wooden beams crisscrossing their way from one side to the other, and supported by several even thicker concrete columns. There was a door at the very back of the room, next to which was a panel on the wall from where the lights of the room were controlled. Next to this panel and the door, the man in question stood next to a wooden chair. And sitting on this chair, tied up, gagged, and handcuffed to the chair, was Jason Finnick. Atlas couldn't see any external injuries on him from where he was standing, but it did appear that Jason was very uncomfortable. The man standing next to him was slightly taller than Atlas. He wore military-grade steel-toed boots, black pants with multiple pockets up and down the legs, and a large dark blue Navy-issued dress overcoat, underneath which was a black hoodie that was obviously too large for him. The hood was pulled up over his head and had been modified with a snap that connected it to the mask that covered the man's face. It could have been some sort of Halloween mask or maybe a paintball mask, but either way it was faceless and expressionless except for the narrow slits for the eyes that allowed the man to see out and the holes that allowed him to be heard when he spoke. Just from where he was standing, Atlas could tell that the man wore enough blades stored on his person beneath his coat to arm a full squad of assassins, but the one that concerned him the most was the serrated short sword that the gloved hands held at Jason's throat, the point of it digging into his flesh. The man looked like something out of a dark fantasy movie, yet Atlas was sure the danger was all too real. What kind of person was this? "Put your gun on the floor," the masked man ordered. Slowly, Atlas reached into his coat and removed his weapon from its holster, then knelt down and placed it carefully on the ground, not taking his eyes off the man the entire time. He heard a grunt from Jason, who strained to pull away as the tip of the blade drew a speck of blood from his neck. "Please let him go," Atlas begged. The man didn't move. "What did you mean when you said gift?" the man wanted to know. Atlas had had about all he wanted to see of Jason's life being put in danger. "You let him go now, or I'll show you what my gift is!" he bellowed, his voice echoing around the room. The intimidating stranger relaxed his grip on the sword and slowly drew it away from Jason's neck. He stepped behind the chair on which Jason was sitting and used his foot to shove the chair and the man on it over toward Atlas. The wooden legs of the chair made a high-pitched squeak as they slid across the concrete, and Jason grunted angrily as it stopped halfway between the two men and fell over. "Leave your gun on the floor," the man told him, gesturing to Jason and backing toward the door. "Any sudden moves, and I'm gone. Or you die, whichever comes first." Atlas knelt down next to Jason's chair, lifting it up and pulling the gag out of his mouth. "You're safe with us," Atlas promised. "We're all the same in here." "I doubt that," the man replied, putting his blade into one of the many sheaths hidden beneath his coat. "He's right," Jason said to Atlas. "Neither of us are psychotic mercenaries who slit other people's throats." Atlas tapped the side of Jason's cheek to tell him to be quiet, then eyed the dark man with suspicion. "You're a mercenary?" "Private security," the man replied evenly. "That's how the kid got a hold of me, I'm guessing." "Killer for hire?" The man crossed his arms and looked at the floor. "Not anymore. Didn't seem right to me." Atlas took that as a positive. At least the man seemed to have a conscience. He held out his hand. "Do you have the keys for these handcuffs?" "Maybe," the man said, cocking his head. "Did your boy have any gifts of his own?" "Let me out of this chair and I'll show you," Jason snarled. Atlas grabbed Jason's shoulder. "No," he said loudly. "That won't help anyone. You weren't even supposed to be here until tomorrow." Jason's tense shoulders relaxed in reservation, and he looked at his feet. Atlas held out his hand again. The man in the coat flicked something shiny into the air, and the key flew across the room and landed squarely in Atlas's palm before he even realized it had been airborne. "I'll let you out, but I want you to go wait in the car," Atlas told Jason. "You stay there until I get back and don't talk to anyone, understand?" "Yeah," Jason said rather glumly. The look on his face and the tone of his voice told Atlas that he knew he'd messed up, so he didn't berate the young man any further. "Thank you, Jason," he said, as the boy stood up and rubbed his raw wrists. "I'll be there once we're done." Atlas and the man both waited until Jason was outside before speaking again. "You said you're gifted? Like me?" the man asked hesitantly. It was the first time tonight he had seemed unsure of anything. His voice was still strong, but he seemed to be thinking judiciously about his words before he spoke. Atlas nodded. "Do you mind if I show you?" he asked, holding up both hands. The man stiffened and stepped back with one leg. "No, never mind. I understand," Atlas said quickly, taking a step back himself. "How do you know anything about me?" the man asked defensively. Atlas took a tip from the person in front of him and chose his words carefully. Like I said, many other people have gifts of their own. One of the people I know has a unique ability to sense gifts in other people. She can't tell what the gift is, but she can sense whether or not that person is gifted just by seeing them. And once she does, she can tell us where they are just by seeing a picture of them again. She saw you out and about one day and took a picture of you with her phone, and then we sent Jason to find you and set up this meeting. The man seemed to be considering this, and Atlas couldn't tell what he thought of it. His body language gave almost nothing away, and his face was still hidden behind the mask. Atlas had seen the picture of him, but it had been taken from behind, so all that he knew was that the man had dark hair and that it was cut short. Beyond that, he didn't know anything else about his appearance. "You said we," the man ventured. "Who is this we, and why did you want to meet me?" Atlas thought for a minute. Could he trust this man? There was no doubt he was gifted, but he didn't know his motivations. Clearly, this man was extremely suspicious of Atlas and Jason and this whole effort, but that didn't automatically mean he was trustworthy. What if he was wary of them because he was on the wrong side of the law, and he knew Atlas was a police officer? This was clearly not going to be over tonight. "I want to answer your questions," Atlas said, holding his hands out. "But I'm not totally sure if I can trust you." The man nodded and spoke without malice. "Smart." His tone changed, and Atlas thought he sounded slightly respectful. He continued. "I don't want to put the rest of us in danger," he said to the man in the coat. "Can you understand that?" "A little," the man replied, his voice coming through with less of an edge. "Can't say I have anyone I feel that way about, but I get that you do." "I'm glad you understand," Atlas sighed. "I don't even know what to call you. Maybe if you could tell me your name, or—" "Not likely," the man said quickly. Atlas sighed and frowned. "Listen, I think if we work at it, we can learn to trust each other, and learn more about each other, and then maybe you'll realize that we're not a threat to you." The man paused, thinking again about what Atlas said. Then he stepped forward a few steps, crossing his arms. "If that's true and you really feel that way, then why are you here at all? Why do you care about people with these gifts? Why not just keep it under wraps, use it when no one's looking, and move on with life?" "Because I believe that all of us can do more," Atlas said with conviction. "I've used my power in my line of work a few times to protect other people and do good for them, but honestly, for me, it isn't enough. I can do more. And I believe that other people with other powers can do more also. But they need someone who's willing to help them believe that there is more to their lives than running, hiding, and pretending to be someone other than who they really are. Some of them need training, and some of them need to be taught how to use their powers properly so that they don't hurt other people. If there was some organization or group of people that I knew that did that for us, I'd be working for them, but I've looked, and there isn't one. So we're taking it upon ourselves to do that. Maybe we can get this thing started, and maybe we can't, but I'm tired of sitting on my hands and doing nothing while people die and the world goes on when all of us could make a difference." The man stared at him from behind the mask, as still as a statue. His head tilted down toward the floor as he pondered what he'd just heard. Atlas thought of something else just then. "Also, my wife is finally on board. I've been trying to convince her for years to let me do this." The man smirked audibly and took in a deep breath. "This place is always empty," he said, and Atlas thought he was probably speaking with a smile. "I can meet you here tomorrow night. What time?" Atlas was shocked. He was so sure that his long-winded soliloquy had been a turn-off, but maybe he'd been wrong. Sure. Probably after, let's say, 10? I don't get off until right before then, so I can be here." "Leave the kid at home, though." "Not a problem," Atlas said, still surprised by this sudden development. He made sure to keep breathing steady as he felt his heart soar over the possibility that he would be able to form this connection with another gifted person, and then to top it all off, the man stopped before he shut the door. "Kay," he said simply. Sorry, what?" "Kay. Call me Kay. That's what you can call me." "Oh, well, all right. Kay it is, then." Kay paused before leaving and turned to look at Atlas once more. He looked at him for a long moment. Atlas didn't know why, and then gave him a nod before he switched off the lights. "Good. Well, See you tomorrow, Mr. Dixon. Atlas trudged back out to his car. The alley seemed just as foreign to him as it had when he entered, probably because he was stepping out of a room that had been brightly lit into the pitch-black night. He felt hopeful and anxious to talk more with this mysterious K character, even if their first meeting had been less than properly arranged. His anxiety transferred now to the upcoming conversation he was going to have with Jason Finnick. The young man was sitting in the passenger seat of Atlas's car. Atlas looked around, but didn't see Jason's characteristic dirt bike parked anywhere in sight. He must have hidden it somewhere, which was very Jason-ish of him. He couldn't tell what Jason's countenance was until he got into the car. The 22-year-old was sitting calmly in the seat when Atlas stepped into the car. It was clear Jason had been patiently waiting for him, and Atlas didn't know if that made him more or less anxious about the discussion that was coming. Atlas had always been a very non-confrontational man when it came to personal situations. His line of work had forced him to compartmentalize his feelings. When he was on duty, he was focused, in control, in charge, and wasn't afraid to speak his mind. His desire to keep his work life and his personal life mostly separate had also extended to his emotions, making interpersonal confrontations more difficult for him than he thought they should be. But he had tried to solve that problem by only confronting when absolutely necessary, and also by making sure that he had a come-alongside attitude when confronting to make the other person or people feel more like he was trying to help them than attacking them. To Atlas's surprise and a little relief, Jason started first. "I know I blew it, and I'm sorry," he confessed right away. He didn't sound angry, more like exasperated at himself. There was a moment of silence as Atlas carefully composed his thoughts and next words. "Well, yes, you did," he said, sounding somewhat apologetic for even having to admit it to Jason. Jason chuckled with a little bit of a smile. "I suppose you want an explanation of what I was doing out here, right?" Atlas nodded with a grin. "That would be helpful, yes." Jason sat up and faced the man. Atlas smiled as Jason's trademark way of integrating hand gestures with all his stories commenced. "I wanted to scope out the meeting spot before the meet tomorrow," he explained. "I figured that this guy was shady and suspicious enough that we shouldn't take any chances, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I was really bothered by how this whole meet was set up. I didn't want to wake anyone up, so I just got up, got dressed, and headed out here to scope the place out." "So you had no idea Kay was here at all?" Atlas asked, starting to understand. "No," Jason said. This was clearly the point he wanted to make by the entire thing. "I wasn't trying to meet him. I was trying to make sure this whole thing wasn't a trap. But then he appeared out of nowhere and downed me with one punch." Atlas's brows rose in surprise. "He took you down with a single punch?" Jason nodded, rubbing the side of his head. "Yeah, it was weird. All it took was one hit and I was out. I didn't even feel it or hear or see him coming." "It must have something to do with his power," Atlas concluded. Jason was not a pushover. For someone to ambush him and take him down so easily was proof that he would rather have Kay working with them and not against them. "If that's how your first meeting with him went, then it's probably wise that I promise to leave you at home tomorrow night when I go to see him again." Jason looked at him, seemingly stunned. "He agreed to meet with you again?" Atlas took a deep breath and nodded. "It was his idea, actually." "Oh, good," Jason murmured, sounding relieved. "At least I didn't totally screw this meetup for everyone." "Well, I'm glad to hear that you didn't just go gung-ho on us and start trying to do things your own way," Atlas said, clapping a hand on Jason's shoulder. Jason shook his head. "I wouldn't do that, I promise. You guys are my family now. Like you always tell me, we do things together." Atlas laughed. "Well, I'm happy to hear that after 5 years, something we've been trying to teach you has finally stuck." Jason laughed in return. "Yeah, I guess I was listening a little bit. Doesn't mean I wanted to listen, no. Just means you held me down and forced it into my ears." Atlas shrugged his wide, meaty shoulders. "Whatever works." Jason reclined in the car seat, yawning. "I'm surprised you're not really mad. You're usually totally unreasonable when you don't get your beauty rest." "I'm going right back to bed when we get home," Atlas informed him. "But Marianne will probably be awake, and she'll make you more miserable than I would." I'll just try to be as quiet as I can," Jason concluded. "That's probably a very good idea. Is your bike around here somewhere?" "Yeah, I hid it in between 2 bushes the block that way," Jason said, pointing back. "All right then. Guess I'll see you when you get home." Atlas said as Jason opened the car door. I'll be in right behind you.